Hey, Mark here from St. Stephen's University. We recently had a Red Room event here on campus called Towards a Decolonizing Faith, and today we're bringing you a talk by Moorhead Thiessen. Now, Kathy has served on Christian Peacemaker Teams with Indigenous peoples in Iraq and in Canada, based out of Winnipeg, and you'll hear her reflect on the question of how do we wrestle with doing ongoing restorative work and at the same time acknowledge how we've been historically complicit in marginalization of Indigenous peoples. And so in this talk, you'll hear her tell her story, but also a couple of really compelling stories from Indigenous people that she worked with in Iraq and Canada. And so I'll just get out of the way without further ado. Here she is, Moorhead Thiessen.
Kathy Indigenous, Winnipeg Indigenous, Darwin Indo-Demisi. In Anishinaabe or Ojibwe, I said my name is Kathy, I live in Winnipeg, and I don't have a clan. And for me, learning the little bit of Ojibwe that I have learned and are continuing to learn is one way that I am decolonizing myself. So many of my friends, Anishinaabe and Cree, speak only my language and don't know their language because of Christians that came and put them into situations in residential schools and forced them not to have their language anymore. So it is only right that I make a very small attempt to learn some of their language. Someone has said, well, if you're learning Anishinaabe, you should be learning Cree too. Well, my brain only works so in one way. So right now I'm trying to learn a bit of Anishinaabe, and maybe, who knows, what I will learn next. I'm happy to be visiting here back in St. Stephen, the home of the traditional and unceded territory of the Passamaquoddy Nation. And it strikes me that when I lived here back starting in 1985, I had no idea of the Passamaquoddy. I heard from Walter several years ago of the Passamaquoddy here, who are fighting a fight to be recognized. And I said, oh, that is very bad that I didn't know they existed. So we are possibly coming back here, and so I have a lot to learn. I've worked with Christian Peacemaker Teams ever since I completed the month-long training in 2010. And as Walter said, I served on the Iraqi Kurdistan team for 5 years in Suleimani, Iraqi Kurdistan, with the Kurdish people, who are the indigenous people of that area and have endured oppression for many, many years and still continue to. So after doing that for 5 years and leaving Vic behind for 6 months a year, it was time to stop traveling across the ocean. And so, fortunately, a position came up with the Indigenous People Solidarity, which is based in Winnipeg. Our 3-member team works primarily in southern Manitoba and northern Ontario. And as Walter said, our work includes accompanying and supporting land defenders, standing in solidarity with and advocating for Indigenous communities as they work towards healing, resisting colonialism, and struggling for sovereignty. But we also engage faith communities and settlers in solidarity work. When we talk to our partners and we say, what should we be doing? They say, teach your own, so we don't have to do it. So that is something that we are regularly doing with church groups and other settler groups, mainly in Winnipeg. The journey of CPT began in 1984, when Ron Sider, a Mennonite leader, challenged the Mennonites and other peace churches to consider that a belief in pacifism is not an excuse to sit safely at home. He suggested Mennonites act on their peace theology by training and sending peacemakers out to areas of conflict where usually only soldiers go. Soon after, the CPT movement began. And we began with a byline that was getting in the way, using our passport privilege and, for many of us, our white skin, to protect those who were confronting the conflict in nonviolent ways. As the years went by and more peacemakers were trained with the skills needed to go to CPT projects, we broadened our base to include those from other denominations. We began to more fully recognize the privilege that we had. We were mostly Euro-Christian descent with US, European, or Canadian passports, going to live in regions where our partners did not have this privilege. And we began to realize that Jesus' way of peacemaking also had something to say about the way that we thought about this privilege. We wrote strategic directions that would guide us in our policies, practices, and attitudes towards racism as we lived and worked with our partners and colleagues. The first strategic direction out of 7 was cultivating a CPT culture that is anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and anti-colonial. Pretty tall, something to strive for. So one part of the way of the growing and learning that we had to do was changing our ideas about getting in the way. This motto held an oppressive element. It implied that as people with passport privilege, we were somewhat more important than the people we walked with. With this realization, we changed the mission and motto to building partnerships to transform violence and oppression. We could not change our privilege. It would always be there. But we knew that the people we worked with were the ones to guide the nonviolent movement. And we were there to walk alongside them. And right now our projects are in Hebron, Palestine, Barrancabermeja, Colombia, Lesbos on the island of Greece, Grassy Narrows, Ontario, and Suleimani, Iraqi Kurdistan. Meanwhile, the partners in our projects began to ask if they could be a part of CPT as well. We appreciated our thoughts and actions on nonviolence and on challenging racism and other oppressions. They wanted to join CPT as team members. But there was a problem. CPT had begun with Mennonites, Quakers, and Church of the Brethren, and we've widened our membership to include other Christian denominations, Catholics, Presbyterians, United, Pentecostal, and others. The ones who were asking were of Muslim faith, Indigenous spirituality, Buddhism followers, and others. And how could these peacemakers fit into the peacemaking mandate of CPT? After all, the C stands for Christian. And many CPTers had come to this work because they were following the way of Jesus to be people of peace. In 2011, the first Palestinian Muslim joined our month-long training. It was a time of growth for her and CPT, learning how to live and learn and work together as people of different faiths. Gradually, over the next 6 years, others have come to be part of the teams. Mandates and policies were changed to create a welcome for those who were peacemakers based on their understanding of the sacred. So that brings us to now. We're very aware of Christianity's complicity in the history of colonialism around the world, in all the places where we work. It's not a good memory, and it even continues today. So it's no wonder that our new teammates face hard questions when they walk around with the red CPT hat on, something that we wear when we're able to identify us as CPTers. And when they talk to relatives and people from their community about the work that they do. And CPT's been having hard conversations. We're struggling how to make CPT a safe place for all of our members. And one of the questions is what we do with the C in CPT. We recognize that throughout history, Christians have used that message to spread the gospel as a mandate to coerce, isolate, and abuse. We realize that we are complicit in this, and that having Christian in our name causes those who have been affected by Christian colonialism to mistrust our work. A year ago, after many hard conversations, our board decided to keep the C for now. The conversation will be renewed after 3 years. However, even now, we have teammates and partners who are still walking with us in this work. I want to introduce you to 2 of the people I've worked with, one in Iraqi Kurdistan, a Kurdish man, and one in Grassy Narrows, And if you're interested, just in the last 2 days, there was an excellent article on Grassy Narrows in London, UK's Guardian, that this person is in that article. And if you just Google Grassy Narrows Guardian, it'll come up because it's very recent. So the first person, Mohammad Sallal Madi, was introduced to CPT when he was a driver, picking up the first CPT delegation at the Suleimani Airport in 2006. He hung out with the team to improve his English fluency, but also became intrigued by these peacemakers. What the team practiced was similar to what he believed. When he applied for the CPT training in 2015, he wrote, "When I was a young child, I witnessed many human rights violations of the people who were dear to me, my family, friends, and the country I loved, Kurdistan. As Saddam Hussein's Al-Anfal campaign were on, the Kurdish paramilitary, known as Peshmerga, or those who face death, began an uprising within the cities, and I was a witness to the violence and destruction that ensued. The roof of my house was used by the Peshmerga as a base to launch rockets and fire their weapons into the nearby Ba'athist Party headquarters, while my family and I hid in the basement for days, listening to the war that raged around us. Later, just after the First Gulf War, civil war broke out within Kurdistan, and seeing my friends joining the fight, I decided to join in. But my father prevented this. He wanted me to complete my studies and graduate from the Teachers Institute. During this time of hardship, just going to find food was a challenge. The bodies filled the streets. The stores were empty and the sounds of war were still around us, but we survived. Later, as I became older, I valued my father's wisdom in not allowing me to fight. He taught me a better way to achieve peace by fulfilling my dream of becoming a teacher. I chose to use positive measures and other incentives to help the children cooperate with their education and learn too, by example, how to resolve issues and disputes with each other nonviolently. Much of the basis of my beliefs in peace and nonviolence is founded within my faith, Islam. I believe that Allah created me in this world to be a representative of Him, to provide a good example of a human being, and to demonstrate to others the way of peace, as this is a reflection of the peace and nonviolence of Allah's love for humanity. For me, CPT is also a reflection of this. Not only can I, as a Muslim, learn from CPT the ways of peace and nonviolence, but I can also share with CPT my own views and convictions of peace and nonviolence, freely and honestly, without worry of being held to account for being of a different faith. The other person is Judy da Silva. She is a clan mother and a land protector from Grassy Narrows First Nation. Back in 2002, members of the community began a blockade against the clear-cut logging of their traditional territory. Because all other measures of trying to talk to the government had failed, they had to take this move. In the winter of 2002, Judy found CPT on the internet. Our team members joined the blockade for that long, cold winter, and we have walked in solidarity with the community ever since. Currently, the community is again raising their voices against the poisoning of the English Wabigoon River system with 10 tons of mercury. The pulp and paper mill and upstream dried and dumped the mercury 50 years ago. 90% of the community is still exhibiting neurological symptoms from this dump. So in May 2016, Judy made a phone call to our team in Winnipeg. A 14-year-old girl from Grassy had taken her life. During the funeral, held in a church, some of the traditional community members had lit a smudge, which is the cleansing of smoldering sage. Later, they lit a sacred fire by the powwow grounds. This would be a place for the young people to come and sit and talk and cry. However, Christian community members were very upset at this, and there was strong divisions in the reserve. So Judy asked us whether CPT and other Christians from Winnipeg would be willing to come and sit around the sacred fire, just to sit and listen in solidarity. So we drove the 4 hours to Grassy and did just that. Judy encourages us to come to visit, to learn and to join in traditional teaching, gathering, and ceremonies. She explains to her people why we are there. CPT came and spent the winter with us on the cold blockade. When the angry log truck drivers and police saw that CPT was there taking pictures and writing stories, they calmed down. We were all safer when we worked together. The important thing about CPT is that although they are Christian, they do not try to make us into Christians. End quote. CPT is not a perfect organization, and some of those who join us leave too soon. It's sometimes difficult to figure out how to do this work in a way that all people feel included. It's been a long journey for an organization that started with Christians who were trying to be different, but who sometimes failed because of the deeply entrenched learnings and of the superiority of one way of belief. However, there's no reason to stop just because it's hard. Indeed, it's even more reason to keep on with the work to decolonize our faith. Thank you.